Hello. I can see you now. Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Oh,
Yeah.
whoops.
Hmm. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions for you about Capsule. I am wondering, yeah, you have the website. Yeah, like as I was trying to research more about it, it's like, yeah, there's like kind of I don't know. There's not like a lot to find online about it unless you like buy it and flip through it. So I have like I think less specific questions, and I'm excited to like hear more from you, just like rambling about the process and stuff. So, but yeah, I'll start with my first question, which is, yeah, why did you want to make a book, make Capsule? And is Capsule just a book? Is it more than a book, a project?
Kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But I guess, well, working together in our freshman year of school. And initially, there was one other member who was part of the group, and the project was also called Capsule, but it was a slightly different concept. Um, Basically, we wanted to interview artists and ask them about their spaces. So maybe like their homes or their studios, or it could also be interpreted as like mental spaces, just basically wherever they produce work, and how their environment informs the work that they make. And that resulted in a little zine. We called it Issue Zero. It was kind of like a test run of what we hoped would become like a larger publication of some sort in the future. And that was in December of 2019. But then afterwards, kind of went into hibernation for a bit. And then the pandemic happened and we all had to quarantine. And so um, we just really like lost steam for a long time. And then last year, Cami and I moved into this apartment together at the beginning of the school year. We would occasionally have conversations about the old capsule and like talk about wanting to revive it in some way, because we were still interested in um, having conversations with other like creative individuals. And then we realized at one point that over our dinner conversations, we had kind of outlined maybe a new like topic of interest that we could pursue for a new project, still somewhat related to Capsule, but it was that instead of focusing on physical environments, we wanted to move to the digital space, which seemed to make sense too because everyone had started using Zoom, and people were just more open to being making connections and being present online because of the pandemic. Um, so then, like a week before, um, there was a funding opportunity through the school, and a week before that deadline, we arrived at this idea together. So we quickly, like, both wrote kind of outlining the project, and then we got the funding, and that allowed us to move back into this apartment over the summer so we could work together in person. And 2 months before we moved back, we that's when we conducted all the interviews over Zoom. And then we came back together. The book.
Sweet. Beautiful. I love that timeline. Yeah, so since 2019. And like where did the concept for that all like sprout from? Like was there like an inspiring moment that kind of started the ball rolling with what it's become? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you cut out for a
Oh,
brief moment,
okay.
but I think the question that you
Oh, I now you cut out too. One sec. We'll see. I'm gonna refresh. Can't see. Hey, sorry, I lost you. Yeah, anyway, yeah, the question I asked was like, was there like an inspiration like back in 2019 that kind of got the ball rolling with all of this?
Um, yeah, so I think the project has always, well, I think that the project, the way it is now, is pretty different in the conception of what it was in 2019. Because in 2019, but I would say that the main thing that bridges the two is that it's always been rooted and grounded in like conversation, and open conversation between creative people. Because initially, like the idea for Capsule with the other person sort of started through these conversations that we were having, uh, and and then for Megan and I, when we were here in the spring, it was also it started from our dinner table. So we would have this ritual where every night we would, regardless of how much we had spent time with each other throughout the day, we would always have dinner together, for most days at least. And we would have these really, really long conversations that sometimes went on for like several hours at a time. And it was such a grounding part of our days, I think. And there's, I think, one day in particular, one conversation in particular that sort of inspired this iteration of Capsule. And we had been talking, actually, wrote some of this down because at the time I had been trying to do this thing where I would record our conversations, like write little summaries of them. And so I have the day when we decided to do Capsule, and it was basically, I think we were talking about how we perceived digital space. Uh, like thinking of visualizing how files were organized on our desktops, things like this. And we had also thought of or talked about like um, wondering what people's routines were like, particularly in the pandemic, and wishing that we could talk to people about their daily routines, like as it pertains to their digital devices. So, like once you open your laptop, and if you say that the opening of the laptop is like the beginning of your day, what does your day look like from that point on to the moment when you like close your laptop? So that was, I think, what we talked about in that one particular conversation. But a lot of these things had been accumulating throughout the semester and the spring. So yeah, I don't know if I hope that answered your question.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, with digital spaces, like, let's see, maybe I have kind of a transitional question here. Probably not. Yeah, I guess, like, going into it, so you knew you were going to do this project on digital spaces and, like, reaching out to artists. How did you choose which artists to reach out to, or did you already kind of, like, know who was going to be here?
So we focused primarily on artists who work in some capacity with digital media in some capacity, because it seemed to make sense. Because at the same time that we wanted to have these conversations about like the way that people structure their digital environments and how that influences like maybe their perceptions of time, and their work. We also wanted to learn more about like various artist practices. So yeah, we just thought it would make sense to reach out to people who work with some sort of digital media. So I think that a lot of the people we ended up speaking with are somehow connected to people at school, just because, I mean, we just imagined, of course, like it would be more likely that they would respond to us if there was some sort of relationship already. So I do think that informed a lot of the like contacts that we reached out to. And we also, I guess it's still unclear what will happen in the future, but we kind of imagined at first that this might become a really long-term project and we might like iterate on whatever ended up being the first version or like publication. I'm not so sure now if we'll do it again, but that was sort of the thinking at first. So I think we were okay with like keeping it. I guess like the group of people that we reached out to was pretty limited in some ways.
Yeah, like I think I mean, you probably know about this more than I do, but it seems like there's this like graphic design like community like based in New York, the New York area, that I think is connected to a lot of schools in the Northeast, including Princeton, and so that like sort of this community of people was like one community that we sort of began to reach out to. There's also like a lot of VR artists, that a couple of VR artists that we spoke to as well, that were sort of adjacent to but not like directly part of this network. And then I also wanted to expand on like what you're saying about like this being an isolated group, and that it sort of feels like Capsule is this overarching like identity maybe for all of these different projects that we've been doing. So the first capsule is like the first sort of experiment, and then this capsule is its own separate sort of concept. But like I guess in the future, if we are to have iterations of Capsule, I think like most likely each one will sort of be its own unique experiment, rather than having them be reproductions of the same sort of template or format in the way that like a literary magazine or like some other sort of like publication like might have like different types of columns or forms of like essays that are published. I think because so much of like what we've done is like space, and we've been thinking a lot about gathering too. And a lot of these things are so like ephemeral and like dependent on like the unique like circumstances of the time and the place and the people, that I think it's sort of like special to have each one be its own sort of separate individual project or experiment or something.
Yeah, give them all their own space, and like don't get confused with like what's been done before, but then also kind of maybe recognizing what did come before, just like as inspiration maybe for what came after. Yeah, that's cool.
Speculation.
Yeah. Yeah, just looking at like the names on the back of Capsule, like do you want to give us like a really brief introduction to who's featured in Capsule? There's like quite a few people, but even just like one sentence. Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
So pretty. Did you guys find them yourselves too?
Yeah. We'll have to send you a copy.
Yeah.
Also, I saw that you're going to New York.
I am.
That was
In October. Yeah, I'm going in October, so we should hang out. You can give me one then, and I'll bring an issue of Volvox for you. Yeah, that'd be great. We'll do a trade.
Yay. Do you want to? Okay. Yeah, we can maybe like go back and forth or something. Okay, so Ben Denzer, who is a Princeton alumni and is really prolific. I don't know if you've like seen his work online already, but he like he makes a lot of artist books, but like experiments with a lot of crazy things. So he had one that's like basically like 100, it's not 100, but like a certain number of slices of cheeses, and each like slice of cheese is like a page in this book.
No, that's so good.
With like some sort of cured meat, I think.
Mortadella.
And like dollar bills and like lots of other random things that like matches or something. I don't know. And then
then there's Cami, and then Eric Lee, another alum. He currently works as a graphic designer at MoMA. But when we spoke to him, I mean, he studied computer science when he was a student here, and then also was part of the visual arts program.
And just to confirm, here is Yale?
Princeton.
Princeton. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do I say about Eric? I guess that when we spoke to him or interviewed him for Capsule, we learned a lot about his personal practice, which he's not really doing so much like of his own work right now. But when he was a student, a lot of it was about kind of like interrogating um, the agency that tools have over our creative processes and like how they're kind of like really actively shaping the work that we make too, even though we don't realize it.
The medium is the message vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Zong, who is also an alumni, and he's also majored in computer science, right? And he was like, I think, pretty good. Like Eric and Jonathan were like best friends, and so actually, this is like something that's interesting, or an interesting part of the process is Eric, I think, told us that we should talk to Jonathan because we talked to Jonathan or Eric earlier in the process. And so a lot of like the people, or a few of the people we ended up talking to were sort of outgrowths of like people that we had initially spoken to, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and that showed up in the conversation too,
that's
because
sweet.
yeah, like I mean, as we like wrote in the description of Capsule, it's all one-on-one interviews, but then it was just cool to see, well, with them specifically, the relationship that they have with each other also became evident, even though the conversations took place in distinct moments. But yeah, and then Laurel, I think you know Laurel, right?
Yeah. Laurel's great.
Yeah, she's wonderful. But she is an artist and designer, and teacher, and she works a lot with web as a medium. And we learned actually from Leslie, who's another student that we interviewed, that I guess you could describe the work that Laurel does as soft tech, or kind of like, like this idea of handmade web and also like finding more mindful ways to interact with technology.
Yeah, I love that whole sentiment.
Yeah. And then Lawrence Leck, who is a VR artist, and also he does so his primary thing is like world building and creating these like virtual environments and worlds. And he is actually an artist in residence at Princeton, like a virtual artist in residence at Princeton last year. They have this international artist residency program where they bring an artist from abroad to like hold like a public lecture, and then also like work with students or like talk to students. And so earlier in the year, I attended his talk and was really interested in his work, which like I guess what he's sort of become known for is this trilogy of films that he created called the Sino-Futurism trilogy, I think. But he like coined this term called Sino-Futurism, which is sort of a riff on Afrofuturism, but it's like he sort of plays with like Orientalism and like common, I guess, perceptions of China, like in the West. And it's like a video essay, which is distinct from a lot of his other work that he does, which is like world building. But it's like very like sort of pseudo documentary esque, I guess.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Yeah, and then Leslie is a student. Where is she again?
University of Washington, St. Louis.
She's studying computer science / HCI, I think, and also combined that with graphic design.
Wow, fun.
Yeah, and she's a really cool person. We've actually only really spoken to her when we had the capsule call, but I think that her work is really interesting. She's also generally interested in, I guess, like looking at technology more critically, and kind of similar to Eric, um, like focusing on the ways that the tools we use are not so neutral, informing our work.
Well, also this worked out really well.
I was gonna say, yeah, because Cami and I, like some of the people we interviewed, we arrived at like their name together, but they're also, I guess, like each of us have more personal connections with some of the people, and the way that we've been alternating works out really well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, so Megan, and then Rendon Johnson, who was my professor. He was a visiting professor last spring, and he does so much. He's like a writer, and I think he writes like poetry and stuff, and then also a VR artist, also like a sculpture artist, and like general sort of visual arts artist, I suppose. But yeah, I guess recently, his a lot of his work has been um, like sort of based in VR. I think he has this essay called oh, I can't remember. It's like something about body. Do you remember? I think it's like something about, do I need my body anymore? Like, do I feel good in my body anymore? I don't know. I can search for if you're interested.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. Anything that you're mentioning, if you want to send links or whatever over, that'd be cool.
yeah, we could do that. But yeah, he sort of like talks about in the essay like how like as an artist who's working in VR and like spending so much time in the medium and like sort of having this very different visual experience, like emerging from that, it's sort of this like really disorienting disassociative experience where you like feel disconnected from like reality. And I don't remember if, like he mentioned like race at all in this like sort of self-analysis or self-reflection, but I know in like some of his other work he does explore um, like his racial, and I think he's a like trans identifying individual. So I think he also like addresses those aspects in his other work too.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know like any VR artists. It's really cool to hear about that. And did any of those like, because it's a book, but does it have any of those visual elements, or is it mostly written stuff? Or
Yeah, so the interesting thing is we screen recorded when we did the initial interviews over Zoom. And at first we were thinking, oh, maybe there's a way that we can like represent or present that information, that visual information in the final booklet. But then um, I think after we had all the conversations, it became clear to us that maybe that's not the most interesting part of what we discovered from the interviews. And also, I guess like people have there are varying levels of comfort, with like displaying what is really like quite a private space. So instead of showing screenshots from the actual recordings, we kind of just pulled screenshots from public works that were mentioned in the conversation. So a lot of it is like drawn from projects that the artists work on personally. So this is like a screenshot of a website that Ben Denzer has, where he creates a collage for every day of his life, and it's just like a collection of images. So photos, screenshots, and then one quote from each day. And he's been doing it since 2011. So
that's so cool.
It's so cool. Yeah, we can send you the link for that.
Yeah.
There's like Internet Onion, and then
Yes.
Eric's portfolio. So it just kind of we included one image for each person based on, I guess, like which part of the conversation was included in the text, because we also had like close to 20 hours of interview material that we had
Yeah.
transcribed, and so obviously, like a large portion of it didn't make it into the printed version. But yeah, we tried to include one image for each person.
Sweet. Sweet.
Yeah.
I'll let you get back to what's the next name on there after Ren?
So Tiger.
Tiger, yeah.
Yeah, Tiger is a graphic designer. I think um, I'm pretty sure Tiger uses they them pronouns. Um, I don't know for sure though. Do you remember?
I have to check. When we looked online for bios, Tiger didn't include include pronouns anywhere.
Right.
Well, we can just keep saying Tiger, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Tiger is also studied computer science.
Oh, yeah.
Went to RISD and I think did the 5-year program and did computer science and graphic design, which all leads to really interesting work.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but Tiger has a lot of work that deals with this idea of world building, but also, I guess related to that is this idea of creating structures or underlying grids for a lot of the pieces, and then I think Tiger tries to allow like the characters of the works then evolve beyond those initial structures or logics that he's built or they have built. And Tiger's also really interested in words, the power of words, and some of the interesting ideas.
Oh, well, I think I lost you for a sec. Ooh, I'm gonna refresh. Oops, hello. Tiger's also interested in
collecting internet moments. So that, like, an example is screenshots from like the YouTube comments section, and just like seeing how that kind of unexpectedly becomes a space where people are really vulnerable sometimes, but also like you can find really beautiful collisions of like words or ideas in that kind of unexpected space. And Tiger was talking about like the power of screenshots as being a really important technology that we have nowadays to preserve these special moments. That
kind of makes me think of like street photography now. It's like digital street photography. That's fun.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah, whoa, that's so cool. Or like people watching in terms of like listening to what people are saying. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's so cool to like, because there's so many separate moments, but you get let into them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And then our last person is Wendy, and she's one of our like best friends here, but she's also just this really prolific.
You paused again. Okay, Wendy. Okay. Prolific.
Yeah, Wendy. So she also works in VR and like digital media right now. She's really interested in cryptocurrency and NFTs, like that whole world. And I think a lot of her work, like she's very much interested in thinking about, I guess, like forms that exceed. I hope I'm not like voicing her like sort of thinking as an artist like incorrectly, but I think a lot of her work is like about creating these organic forms that are almost alien in nature, or like sort of push against like normative representations of like self and identity. And she created these AR filters for one of the classes that she took last semester on Instagram, and they're really like intricate sort of insect alien like outgrowths that sort of surround like your face, or like have these like things that are like circling around your head, or like sort of shooting off in like these odd angles and directions. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Do you have want to add things?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I also had a conversation with Wendy recently, and she said something about like wanting to, or she's really into world building too,
Yeah. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
similar to Tiger, and once said to me, I really feel like I could build a world for all of, yeah, just interested in building worlds and seeing how whole worlds can be used
Mm-hmm.
to represent like different aspects of a person.
Mm-hmm. And what was it you said that she said? Like, I got cut off right before you said, Wendy said
She
that
would
she could.
build a world for all of her close friends and family.
Sweet. I like that. That
Yeah.
would be like a really nice present, just like
Yeah.
some kind of world building for you. Yeah. That's sweet. Yeah, that reminds me of like creative visualization. Like, I read this book, and it kind of like one of the meditations in it was about like building a sanctuary in your mind that's just like a happy place to go, but like it's really quite developed so that it's like easy to escape to. So like maybe someone writing about one, like, and kind of like helping you construct like a sanctuary in your mind, but like constructed by them. Like, what a cute gift. Oh my god.
Yeah,
That's so
amazing.
cute.
Wendy just also recently told us that she built a dream for one of her friends as they were falling asleep.
That's so great. The
I also
internet.
wanted to ask what the name of the book was that you read.
Oh, right. It's by this woman Shakti Gawain, and it's called Creative Visualization. It's by like New World. What is it? New World Library or something like that. But it's like Western spirituality stuff, which like sometimes makes me feel funny. But this book was really good. Shakti was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to check it out.
Definitely. And there's also like finding your spirit guide in there. I'm like, okay, sure. But yeah, anyways, Wendy, awesome. And then also to hear like a bit about yourselves. Yeah, like how would you describe yourselves, especially in regards to this project? But also, what are you studying? I don't even know what you're actually studying personally.
Oh, I feel like this year I have to become better at talking about my work.
Oh god, it's hard.
It's so hard. I feel like in school right now, I was just telling Cami, every time I go into the classroom or the studio, I just have to defend myself. And maybe it's good, but okay, well, I'm studying architecture,
Cool.
but I'm also in the visual arts program, and here you can't really like declare a specialization, but you can informally do so. So of course I'm like focusing a lot on graphic design work. And right now, I just started thinking about my thesis, my thesis for the visual arts program. Essentially, it will just culminate in like an exhibit or a show at the end of the year.
Cool.
Yeah, and we just had to give like 15-minute talks on like kind of propositions for what the show will be, which was quite daunting because I like hadn't really thought about it until about a week ago. But I arrived at this idea of time, which is very broad, but I think from a lot of the work that I've been producing over the past few years, I've become aware of how deeply afraid I am of losing things and losing time.
Yeah.
That's like evident in the way that I try to preserve everything throughout my day. I guess like specifically in the form of photos on my phone. That's like one really concrete example of how I'm building this archive, but it kind of feels like these items that are meant to be keepsakes are actually really just clutter, and they've kind of lost their value digitally because I can't retrieve any of those moments. So there are just too many. And so I started thinking about ways that I could maybe identify a new method for collecting and also identify what exactly it is I want to be collecting and what I deem to be worth saving for my day to day lived experience. And then that brought me to this idea of time because time is kind of like the common denominator in all collections because it's just the accumulation of something over a period. And then I started looking at collections about time. And then I started looking into kind of like new ways of defining time and keeping time. And I actually came across Paragon Day.
Oh yeah, sweet.
Yeah, and I was looking into that. And I think all of this has just inspired me to maybe like try to come up with a new way of visualizing time or just play around with this idea and see where I end up. So that's what I've been thinking about recently with my
Sweet.
personal work.
That sounds like a really good path to be headed down. Yeah, it's fun. And I feel the same way about keeping too many photos on my phone and all that, and
Yeah.
need to organize that. Yeah. So let me know where you get with that.
Yeah, I'll keep
Yeah.
you posted.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. And then what about you, Cammy?
Yeah, I guess, okay. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about your stuff. I mean, I think so. My concentration is in English, and then I'm getting certificate.
Oh, there you go. Hello.
Okay. Hi. That's so weird that it keeps happening because we can
Yeah.
still see you. We
Oh,
can still
okay.
see-
We.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, so majoring in English and then minoring, getting certificates in East Asian studies and Asian American studies. And then also like I'm really interested in like art history too, and like art criticism or like criticism broadly, like cultural criticism too. But like it's sort of, I don't know, the university has weird policies about like formally declaring like certain like concentrations and certificates and things like that. But I guess I have a lot of like random different interests in various things. Um, I guess, I mean, so for East Asian studies, I was really interested in Japanese like art and culture. Oh no, is it?
Oh no, I'm good.
Okay. And and also like I guess recently I've been thinking a lot about like East Asian spirituality or aspects of spirituality, which is not really related to my independent work. But for my independent work, um, I guess I've been thinking a lot. I was also at one point going to also get like a minor in gender and sexuality studies. So in my thesis, I am sort of interested in triangulating um, or thinking about like the training that I've received as in Asian American studies and East Asian studies, which like sometimes have like overlap, but are very distinct disciplines in how they approach like race, I guess. And I'm sort of interested in thinking about the intersection of the two in my thesis, and also like gender, because I think the relationship like between the East and the West is interesting, and how gender is often evoked in these discussions, with the West being like the male patriarchy and the East often being portrayed as more feminine. And then in addition to that, I'm really, I guess with Capsule, as Capsule shows, like really interested in thinking about technology in our relationship to like development in technology, and how that affects our behavior in relation to other people, relationships to other people. And so as my sort of overarching framework, I'm right now thinking about the cyborg as a figure, both as it appears in like pop culture, um, also in like relation to techno-orientalism and Asian American studies, and then also in feminist theory, so like Donna Haraway's like Cyborg Manifesto, and like other sort of feminist scholars have thought a lot about the cyborg as a site of resistance for like women and other marginalized like people who have often like been like haven't had control over their narratives. Also, like sorry, one more thing is like the cyborg is often feminized or like portrayed as a woman. So like an Ex Machina, and like Her and movies like that, where there is like an AI or like a machine, is often a woman.
Like Blade Runner. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
Blade
god.
Runner is a really good example.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's a whole trope that is weird. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting why that happens. That's interesting. Cool, cool. Yeah. There's a lot to think about there. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm looking back at my questions to see. Yeah, so the collaborators came together. I guess like once yeah, like what was the flow of the process? Can you just tell me about like the A to B of Capsule? Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we started in when did school end,
May.
in May. So we had both gone home after the last school year ended, and from home we actually did this quite efficiently, but we called once to talk about how we wanted to approach the interviews. And I mean, we framed them more as conversations, and these are our collaborators as opposed to like interviewees, I guess. Yeah, but we called and then talked about what questions we wanted to ask and how we wanted to structure the interview. And essentially, we arrived at this idea of kind of framing it like a house tour. So we told everyone that we wanted them to share their screen with us. We asked to record it. And we had a list of items that we wanted them to show us throughout the tour and gave them the option to either gather the items beforehand in preparation for the call or to just kind of navigate through the space freely as we were calling over Zoom. And that it was also interesting to see like the way people decided to lead us through. But the thinking was um, we by creating this list of items and asking people to navigate through their space, we would both be able to have conversations about the way that different digital artifacts are perceived, but then also see um, through the way that people just like navigate to different locations on the desktop. We could also then see more about the way they structure their digital environment. And one of our ideas at the beginning of this process was that the laptop space kind of could be described either as like a physical environment or maybe an extension or like exported piece of your brain, basically. And so we were, yeah, interested in seeing the way that like file structures were present in people's devices, and yeah, I guess just like looking at what areas people focused on in the digital environment. So we sent them an email with all of that information, and then conducted these conversations over the course of May and June. And then in July, we moved back here and started working on transcribing and then organizing the transcripts into some sort of narrative. And I think that we kind of hit a wall at one point and we're really unsure about what to do with all the content that we had. It was so much.
Overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah, and so at first we had this idea that we would do kind of like a choose your own adventure type of text where we would draw really short excerpts from the transcripts and have a series of booklets organized by theme, because there were a lot of recurring themes that came up in these interviews or conversations. So we wanted to create like narratives related to the same theme, but within each narrative, there would be multiple options at each juncture. So the viewer could then also kind of be a participant in the construction of the narrative. Um, but then I guess that didn't feel, it felt like maybe a bit too curated in a way, and we wanted to include more of the conversations that we had. And so then one day Cami just started like copying and pasting things into a document, and they were like really long chunks of text from the transcripts. But then we were really excited by the way that, despite the fact that we had these conversations in isolated times with each individual, it sounded really like they were all in the same room together because a lot of the same ideas kept coming up. And it was cool to see how um, there were differences, of course, based on like each person's like subjective experiences, and also their own work informed their perspectives, of course. But I think like the common denominator the whole time was the two of us, because we were like kind of leading the conversation. So it was just really cool to see it all come together in that way. Yeah.
That's so cool. So then the book is like a flowing like quilt of all those conversations kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
As like a quilt.
Yeah, it feels like a quilt. So cool. And I also wondered, is there like a table of contents at the beginning of it, or is it just like like a scroll of stuff?
There's a key. I can send you a scan too. I
Yeah.
tried to scan this. So
True.
there's a preface,
Right.
and then after that is a key with all the icons that we included.
Ooh, sweet, sweet.
Yeah, and then after that, it starts off with this kind of intro. Essentially, we just drew one or two sentences from each person from the very beginning of our Zoom calls. So you kind of like get a sense of what the energy was like at the time that we called. And people, I mean, obviously, like everyone was used to doing Zoom. So I think like also in some ways that this wouldn't have been possible without that kind of like societal shift, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then after that, we just go straight into the conversation.
Sweet, sweet. Very nice. I like it, yeah. And then, yeah, looking at the book, just like seeing the materials that it's made of, like what materials is it made of? Like the paper looks really cool, and I just want to know.
Yeah, so I guess the main paper that we used, we ordered from online from French paper, is that what they're called? Which was one of like just a online like company that the printing press we worked with recommended. So we printed with Secret Riso Club in Brooklyn, and so the text itself is all Riso printed in this like kind of green color, and then the cover part is cardstock, and then we wrapped it in hanji paper, which is just sort of something that we had on hand, and it's basically it's a Korean paper that is made from the bark of a mulberry tree, and it's really strong and like flexible, and it's like soft too, like you'll see when you get a coffee.
So cool, yeah.
But we decided to wrap them because we the cardstock that we got for the cover was sort of glossy, and so when it printed the Riso, or when the Riso was printed onto it, it didn't like it was a little uneven, like this the blob.
Right.
We wrapped it, and it feels really nice, like more like a book.
Like it.
and then it's hand bound, just with like cotton cord, and using like a really simple pamphlet stitch.
Cool. And did you guys sew it, or yeah, did you guys sew it together? Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. We've done
Yeah.
50 out of the 100 so
Oh,
far.
yeah, I feel you. Like, yeah. I still have, like, tote bags that I haven't embroidered for Volvox and stuff. Yeah. Like, made to
Oh.
order. Made to order. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice, though. I really like the collaboration of materials on Capsule, yeah. Because, yeah, for Volvox for the next issue, I wanted to do hand bound, so I was inspired.
Whoa.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I guess, yeah, more personally, what does Capsule mean to you? Like, what do you cherish about Capsule now that it's like come to a close?
Wow. I think something we wanted to emphasize is that the conversation is ongoing, so it's not actually closed, hopefully. And I mean, I guess you saw the website. I kind of did that really quickly, but we initially wanted to find a way to kind of import it into the digital space again and allow like people who read through Capsule to also add their thoughts. Maybe like in the form of annotations of some sort. I guess that's something that we're still like working out. I don't know if I have like the coding skills to do that myself. That was one idea, and we also actually are planning an exhibition for February that's tied to Capsule, and we want to, of course, display like a copy of this in the gallery. But then at our launch event, we also recorded the majority of the event. Yeah, we like set up a little makeshift tripod and set up the phone far away, so we captured everyone like coming in, because like Cami mentioned, one of the like root ideas is gathering, or like an experimental way of gathering people. Yeah, so we recorded that gathering and we want to play that in the exhibition as well. And then there's kind of like an additional component that we're thinking about that involves 2 voice recorders. And we want to maybe like set them on pedestals in the gallery and have one in front of the other. And maybe we could have like a recording of one of the individuals from this book, like from the initial Zoom recordings. We could have like an excerpt from something they said on one of these voice recorders, and then ask people who visit the gallery to listen to that and then record their response on the opposite recorder, and then just keep kind of alternating back and forth. So by the end of the show, we'll have kind of somewhat disjointed but unified conversation on 2
That's so
different
great.
devices.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Nice. And so, wait, I can't remember if you said that this exhibition is like happening at some point, or like where's the planning of it at? Do you know when?
Yeah, it'll happen, I think, the first 2 weeks of February, and it's going to be on campus at Princeton, in the space called the Collab, which is like it's an interesting space. It's like an exhibition space, but it's also slightly public space because it has these doors which open out into this forum area, which people would just come in and out. So yeah, that's sort of what the plan is right now.
Nice. That's exciting. That's awesome. Wish I could go see that. Yeah. But
We'll
yeah,
see.
are you gonna post any of the stuff you document? And
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Sweet.
I mean, and we can send you like photos and stuff, of course. Of
Sure,
anything.
yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else do we have here that I want to make sure I ask?
I guess one thing I also wanted to add in terms of the meaning of the project now, which is not as much related to the project itself, but just the nature of our collaboration with the project. I think um, I've learned a lot about like what it means to collaborate with people on a project, and like what like a healthy collaboration entails, which I think is not so far removed from like fostering healthy relationships with people and friendships in your life.
Yeah.
Like I think collaboration is like just a different form of relationship. It's And the fact that also we're like friends and roommates also means that there are multiple layers to the collaboration, and the way in which we relate to one another. And I think that this is so special in how we went about it because it truly felt like um, we were sort of drawing energy from one another and like bouncing off ideas. And also, we brought different skills to the project that complemented one another well. And so
Yeah.
it feels like it's a really special collaboration overall too.
Yeah, when you were talking about how like you're more of an English major and you're more of like visual arts, like bringing the two together for this seems like a really good pair. Like, and then, yeah, I don't know. I guess that balanced out really well. Like any anecdotes about that? I guess he said, yeah, I don't know. Any anecdotes from the whole process? Like, are there any memories that kind of stick out from the process with each other or like with other people?
Such a whirlwind. I think the last portion definitely felt rushed. And like we didn't really have the time and space to like recognize the work that we did maybe.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess we can do that now.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. Well, I mean, we did some crazy things for this book. Like, we pick up the.
Yeah, I was just gonna.
Yeah, so because we printed with the studio in Brooklyn, we took a suitcase one day, like from the train on campus all the way to Penn Station, and then we got off at Penn Station and then took the subway for like close to an hour to get to the studio. And then when we got to the studio, we put like thousands of sheets of this paper back into the suitcase and like packed it really nicely, and then took the suitcase all the way back to Princeton so that we could hand bind this. And then after that, we took like 25 copies back to New York because that's where we had the launch, because a lot of the people we talked to live in New York, and then also like a lot of friends of ours who were kind of in touch with us throughout the process also live in the city, so it just made sense to host it there. So I think that like there was a lot of movement that happened just for this.
Yeah. Also, like a funny little thing, when we were on the subway riding to the print studio, somebody asked, Megan was standing with the empty suitcase, and somebody asked her, do you like need to sit down? Like, do you want to sit down? The suitcase was empty at that point, which is so really thoughtful and nice for her. I just thought it was funny because the suitcase was like pretty light at that point.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Well, very nice person. And yeah, I mean, we don't know Megan's strengths. Maybe an empty suitcase is enough to need a rest.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because in like your Instagram caption, you mentioned like specifically ideas of like interface design and intimacy online. Do you have any like specifics about those kinds of things that'd be fun to know about as someone who hasn't read it yet, but is yet to read it. Yeah, like what will we learn about? What are some things we might learn about intimacy online and stuff like that in Capsule, or maybe not learn, but just like think about. Yeah.
I think one of the main themes, actually, I'm thinking of Laurel right now, because she mentioned this a lot, but just that intimacy online is a lot more possible than people think, and you can become a lot closer with people than you think, despite like physical distance, you know? And related to that is also the idea of privacy, which is another, I mean, it's complicated, but there are a lot of ways that you can kind of create spaces for more private moments and intimate interactions with others online. And also, I guess like a specific thing that I remember from Ben actually is with his collage project. We asked him something about how he what his relationship is with like posting all of this information online, and it's like quite an intimate look into his daily experiences on a public platform. But he mentioned that quality over quantity is often something that people say, but quantity is a good quality in itself too, because like for these collages, simply by the sheer volume of information that he's posting, he's kind of like reincorporating a sense of privacy for himself, because there's just so much that people would have to parse through if they really wanted.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so I thought that was an interesting idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that because like, yeah, sometimes I'll blog online and then I'm like, oh no, everyone's gonna read it, but it's like no, like nobody, like whoever explores your website deserves to read it at that point.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
That feels like something Laurel would like say.
Well, that's funny. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, thinking about like internet intimacy. I think it definitely like building a intimate internet relationship definitely comes with like two people who believe in that as well. That like just that it can become something. And it's funny too because when I go to New York, I'm gonna stay at Laurel's place, and so that's funny. We're friends. Yeah, we're real friends.
We all have to.
Yeah.
Gather.
We do. We do have to gather. Please, thanks. So yeah, I'm really excited. And I guess yeah, ending off. Pretty sure I've asked everything that I really want to, but I'd love to hear like, do you have a favorite excerpt from the book? If you want to read like a favorite excerpt.
Oh, that's such a nice question.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have a few favorite moments.
Let's see. Yeah, if you want to do one, or if you want to do two, or whatever.
Oh wow, this is a shockingly difficult question.
Okay, I have a few, or two. I mean, there's actually like a few that I like, but there's one is like a short one, and then one is I guess I don't have to read the whole thing, but so one this is sort of like towards the midpoint, I think, where Jonathan starts rambling about something for a really long time. There's like several paragraphs, and then he ends and he says, "Yeah, I don't know, that was kind of a ramble." And then Eric says, guy rambling." And it's just a funny moment because obviously like Eric and Jonathan weren't talking to one another, and like
There's another one.
Yeah, there's another
with Eric and Jonathan about having to plug in their laptop.
Oh,
Eric
that's so
said,
good.
sorry, I need to go plug in my laptop, so I'm going to walk over to the bed. Jonathan said, yeah, also I need to plug my computer in. I'm going to be right back.
That's so great. You're just on the same wave. That's so great.
Yeah. And then I actually really like the ending a lot because so the question that people are addressing is do you find that there are habits that you've picked up by navigating space digitally that have translated to the way you interact with your physical environment? And then Eric responds first, and he sort of has this little like rambling response, and then he says, what else? Yeah, I can't think of anything. And then Megan says, speed, attention span. And then Cami says, I was thinking of attention span for one. And then we end with Rin, something that Rin says, and it's again like completely like irrelevant sort of to the conversation from before, but it fits in. And he says, "Okay, what about this? What is this? There's, it's just a bunch of random stuff. This is just like a folder. That's like a bit of a lecture, an old VR piece that I've stored somewhere else." Um, and he goes on, and then he ends. This is like the Port of Miami live stream. You can watch this at any time, but I think there's like there isn't the one, but basically you could sit here and watch these cruise ships just kind of arrive out of nowhere, and their scale is just like, I don't know what's outrageous, and that's it. That's my tangent, and that's sort of the way we end the
I
whole
love
thing.
it.
And it's fun because it's like, was the whole thing a tangent? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's so good. I'm so excited to read it. That's so awesome. Yeah, I like how it at the end like ties it together with like acknowledging that it was a tangentness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we sent out the like transcript for the narrative for all the uh, participants to read through, um, Jonathan said something about how like maybe we should reconsider that because it was like it feels like the whole thing was kind of just like speculation and then it was inconclusive at the end. But I think that's actually maybe what our thesis is.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. And I think conversations are so readable too. It's so easy to read, and it's like there's so many like pretentious books and stuff. It's like nice. It's something you like want to sit at the beach or in your backyard and like read, and you don't have to think about it. Yeah.
I like intentionally left in a lot of fillers too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to see how that also became like sort of like a marker of the different
Mm-hmm.
Like tagging people, sort of.
Yeah. Sweet.
That's so.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Oh yeah. Did you have any more?
Yeah, let me see. There was something, but I just lost it. Oh, I guess this is kind of like a nice little passage. I said, or I asked, how often do you save or screenshot what you see? And then Ben says, pretty often. And I was, picking dandelions this whole day. And so I wasn't on my phone as much as I was this day. And then he goes on and talks about like saving screenshots. And then Tiger follows that up by saying, yeah, I love that feeling, like whenever I'm browsing, which is why I feel like, yeah, like, I don't know, screenshot is such an important technology. I don't know, I just feel
I like that one too.
yeah, like the flow from one person's speech to the sometimes really works.
Yeah, it's like a good remix.
It's seamless, yeah.
Yeah.
So those moments are exciting in the text, I think.
Sweet. Yes, I like that. I found 2 more little questions on my little list. Yeah. First of all, yeah, did you pull any inspiration from other publications? Which ones and how? I don't know.
Whoa. Publications like Can they be texts or like?
Yeah. Yeah, like any other thing.
Yeah, Laurel actually, I mean, she showed this to me when we were close to being done, but I think like we were still working on it, on designing it and everything, and piecing the narrative together. So it was informative to some extent. But she showed me this booklet or like a reader that she had put together for one of her classes years ago with a few other teachers. And it was also a transcript of their conversation. Um, and then, like, at the back, they had listed a lot of the sources, I think, that they mentioned throughout. I could be remembering this incorrectly, but that was a cool kind of like compatible resource. And then also, I just thought of um, David Reinfurt, who started the graphic design program here. He recently launched or released a book called A New Program for Graphic Design, and essentially it's all of his like teachings into put into one book, but instead of writing the text, he spoke it through a series of lectures. I think it was like over the course of 3 days, he spoke for 8 hours maybe and recorded the whole thing. And then the transcript of that text with some edits was made into the book. So I think that also like is reminiscent of the way that we did Capsule and how it's a conversation. And we kind of like had all of these individuals write the book with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Super
I think
cool.
also like one text that I had been sort of thinking about too. I guess in terms of the construction of uh, the narrative was this documentary kind of by Adam Curtis called Hypernormalization, which basically to make the film he went into the BCC archives and like watched like just a ton of like stuff that they had, like footage of like random like news things and stuff, and then from watching all of these like just hours and hours of footage, he like kind of put things together and like brought pieces of the footage and then like sound bites and then came up with this like thesis, but it also wasn't really a thesis because he just sort of like meanders in and out of different events in history and like kind of like comments on them. But so it's like really like this really interesting like exploration of how we arrived to this like present moment. Like he sort of talks about like the Donald Trump election and stuff like that. Um, and I feel like Capsule is similar in how it like pulls from this like really large pool of content and is sort of stitched together and like pieced together with different fragments of things that amounts to something that can't really quite be articulated in a single thesis statement, but still has all these really interesting trains of thought that all sort of like trickle into one giant stream of
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like related to that, it while we were having the conversations, I think both of us were doing like additional readings to kind of like help inform the way that we were leading the conversations. But we realized at one point that this was kind of like research, but in reverse, because as opposed to like reading the sources and then identifying people to interview, we basically collected sources through the interviews and through like the experiences and information that other people were aware of, and then went back to the internet and found those and then read them. So that was also kind of like an interesting experience.
Yeah. But you said I like lost train of thought for a second. You said you went back to the internet and found I like totally blanked for a second.
Found the sources that people had mentioned
Right.
conversations. So it
Right.
was like the people and the conversation was the first touch point.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So people would mention something and then you'd look it up and then did you ever bring that back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I like that. Mm-hmm. And what did you say that one book was called where the guy recorded his lecture?
Oh, yeah. Called A New Program for Graphic Design.
Program for graphic design. I'm just gonna write that. Cool. And then my actual last question, and I don't even know if it's possible, if it is applicable, but I'll just ask it. Yeah, what kind of person would Capsule be if it were human? Or could it only be one person, or does it have to be, because there's so many people involved in it. But if you had to think of the essence of it.
Whoa.
I think Capsule is like a computer more than a person.
Yeah.
What was the question we asked people at the end of our days? We also had a series of rapid fire questions that we asked all people, and there was one that felt similar to this,
Right.
but I can't remember now. We asked the rapid fire questions were based on the perspective of the laptop or device. So we asked people to about the computer.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Like that.
I mean, it feels like a chat room.
Yes, yeah. I love chat rooms.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. A chat room. That's good. Do you think there will ever be a chat? Because when you mentioned, like, it'd be nice online for, like, people to be able to add their comments, it kind of makes me think of, like, World of Text or something. I don't know if you've seen that whole thing. It's like a website called My World of Text or something, and you can kind of click anywhere and add text, which is nice. But yeah, like some kind of guest book website would be fun, but it's not like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the really, really low-tech version of that right now is just the email that we put on the website.
Oh, yeah, true.
I don't think anyone has written to us.
Right, yeah. So you would want emails like responding to the text or just responding to the idea?
Yeah, I guess anything.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Because initially the plan was to plant these in books and bookstores with little note cards that we would have like an envelope with our address and paid postage for people to email us and like a physical response to the booklet. But then we printed them and they're quite like, I mean, they're not that thick, but for a pamphlet, like it would be noticeable if you put it into a book. So we kind of weren't able to do that.
That's cool though, like thinking of like geocachers or something, like hiding them around. That's cool. I like that idea. Yeah. But yeah, that's so cool. I'm excited to get my hands on one of those. And yeah, I guess it kind of reminds me of like one of the pieces in Metamorphosis was with, here, I think I have it there. 1 second. I'll grab it. Nope, that's not
Metamorphosis.
Open?
What's Metamorphosis? Oh, the previous issue of Boba.
It's not there. Never mind. But yeah, one of the pieces is like, I don't know if you know like eworm.club, but it's this website and it's like a little blog shared between just friends. It's like e-worm.club. I don't know if you got to it, but I'll link it.
Oh yeah, I see it. This is so nice. It's like Pedal. Do you know about Pedal?
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, but then so I interviewed them and I just kind of like had a Google Doc of a bunch of questions and then they all kind of just like wrote out answers, but it was like very informal, like digital, like dialect, you know? Cool. Yeah, when I first looked at it, I was like not expecting it to be like a digital language, you know, like not spelling things right on purpose and everything. So I was like going in and like starting to edit, and they were like, actually, we kind of want it like that. And I'm like, my brain had to like shift gears. I was like, yeah, you're right, actually, yeah. But yeah, that's fun. That was fun how they did that. But yeah, anyway, kind of reminded me of that, just the fun little informal conversation kind of stuff that's fun to read and brings up a lot of cool ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. But that concludes my interview questions. So thank you so much for answering all my pressing questions and for being so descriptive. I'm really excited. I don't know. Yeah, I guess this is for the newspaper, and then the interview will go on Patreon, and then we'll see what else happens. I think a couple of these, because the last interview I did too was kind of fun, so I might make them into whole little articles for the website and then have a blurb about it in the newspaper. So
That's good.
we'll see. Yeah. So
Keep us posted.
Yeah.
yes, I will. Yeah. And yeah, it'll come along. It'll be great. And thank you.
Thanks for reaching out to us to talk. It's really exciting.
Yeah, nice to chat. Nice to see your faces. It's awesome.
Yeah, hear your voice.
Yeah, whoa. It's like, after knowing someone online, it's like almost overwhelming to just be like, whoa, whole person. Cool,
Yeah.
that's good. Not that I wasn't expecting it, but it's just. But yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me today. And I'll see you around on the internet and maybe in October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, really nice to talk.
You too. And yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
And good night.
Good
Bye. Good night.